Power without ego. The Stoic way to lead without losing yourself. They called him a philosopher king, not because he quoted books, but because he ruled from the soul. Marcus Aurelius had more power than almost anyone in history, but you wouldn't know it by how he lived. He didn't boast, didn't flaunt, didn't command from vanity. He wrote in the dark, alone with his doubts, checking his ego before he made decisions that shaped empires. Power didn't make him proud. It made him more responsible, more aware of how fragile he was, how temporary this life is, how dangerous the mind can be when you feed it praise instead of truth. He lived close to the earth, not above it. He was a leader because he served the people, not because he needed to feel above them. This is the Stoic paradox. True power comes from humility, from restraint, from leading yourself before you lead anyone else. A Stoic leader doesn't bark orders. They move first, quietly, clearly, with vision, with discipline. They know that ego is loud, but wisdom is silent. They choose action over attention, impact over image. They don't seek followers, they create leaders. They don't inflate their worth, they measure themselves by what they can withstand. A Stoic leader never forgets that fortune is borrowed, that titles fade, that applause dies, but character remains. You don't need to hold a throne to lead. You don't need riches to lead with strength. You need clarity, discipline, patience, and self-control. You lead when you speak with honesty, when you act with courage, when you forgive even when it hurts, when you remain still under pressure and don't betray your values for popularity. Most people chase power to feel important, but a Stoic knows that the highest form of power is to master yourself, to respond instead of react, to stay calm when chaos erupts, to walk away from petty battles, to build quietly while others boast. That's real leadership. To choose purpose over praise, principles over pride, service over status. Because power isn't a crown, it's a weight, and the Stoic carries it, not for themselves, but for something higher. When you think of the Stoic leader, don't imagine a man in gold. Imagine a worker, covered in dust, showing up before anyone else, leaving after everyone's gone, and never once asking for a round of applause. Their leadership is rooted not in speeches, but in sacrifice, not in ego, but in effort, not in appearance, but in action. You'll know them by how they show up in silence, by the weight they carry without complaint, by the peace they preserve without needing recognition. They win quietly. They fail with dignity. They learn endlessly. Their identity doesn't come from their rank, but from their resilience, their refusal to be shaken by gossip or flattered by empty compliments. They don't need to shout to prove they're in control. Their presence is steady because their ego is quiet. This is power without ego, the Stoic leader's code. They never ask, "What's in it for me?" They ask, "What's right?" They don't fear losing approval. They fear losing integrity. They don't crave the spotlight. They crave the truth, even when it hurts. They don't climb ladders for attention. They build foundations for others to stand on. And that's the paradox of Stoic leadership. It's not about rising above others. It's about lifting others up. Power isn't a prize, it's a test. And how you use it reveals who you really are. A weak man seeks power to hide his insecurity. A strong man rejects ego to protect his soul. Because ego is always hungry. It always wants more. But the Stoic knows when enough is enough. And in that restraint lies real strength. Power is not given to serve the self. It's given to serve the whole, to protect, to correct, to guide, to grow, and to do it without needing to be thanked. A true leader doesn't panic when the tide turns. They plant their feet, breathe through the storm, and listen. They listen more than they speak, because they know real power listens first and acts second. They're not ruled by impulse, not hijacked by pride. They delay judgment, they weigh decisions. They carry the burden of responsibility without dragging others into it. You'll see them in moments of pressure, not flinching, not pointing fingers, not blaming the world, but asking, what did I miss? What can I do better? That's Stoic leadership. No theatrics, no drama, just discipline. Most people want to be seen. The Stoic wants to see clearly. They step back, observe the room, read the energy, read themselves. They understand that leading others requires first leading their own thoughts. When anger rises, they pause. When insulted, they stay composed. When praised, they remain steady. Because they know both blame and praise are temporary, but character is eternal. And ego ruins everything. Ego tells you you're owed something. Ego tells you you're above others. Ego makes you forget that you too are human and fragile and flawed. The Stoic strips ego from power and replaces it with purpose. They lead from service, from example, from values that don't change with public opinion. They don't chase trends. They build timeless foundations. They don't lead from emotion. They lead from reason. Even when they're hurt, they don't strike back out of pride. They respond from principle. Even when they're praised, they don't let it intoxicate them. They return to humility. Because they've seen what pride does to leaders. It blinds, it divides, it corrupts. So they stay grounded, close to the people, close to their duty. They don't demand loyalty. They earn it through consistency, through clarity, through quiet courage. Not noise, not threats, not manipulation. They walk with dignity, even when mocked, even when doubted, even when misunderstood. They understand that leadership is not about being liked. It's about doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. That's power without ego. A Stoic leader leads by asking the hard questions, by doing the hard work, by enduring the hard days, without letting their soul get hard. They don't bend their values for short-term gain. They don't sell their principles for popularity. They don't inflate their identity with attention. They refine their soul through silence. When others panic, they focus. When others brag, they stay silent. When others chase praise, they chase progress. You'll notice them not because they speak the most, but because when they do, their words are earned, measured, necessary. Their actions carry more weight than 1,000 empty speeches. They don't lead with emotion, but they don't lack empathy. They feel, but they don't let feelings dictate their decisions. That's balance. That's mastery. That's leadership. They don't need a stage to influence the world. They do it in how they live, how they treat others, how they hold themselves to a higher standard, even when no one's watching, especially then. That's Stoic leadership. They accept blame when things go wrong. They deflect credit when things go right. Because they know they're not the center. They're a steward, a protector of the mission, a servant of the greater good. Their legacy is not in titles, but in lives they've helped, conflicts they've diffused, people they've elevated. They don't crush opposition. They listen, learn, adapt, and remain unshaken. That's the paradox. Power makes most people arrogant, but the Stoic leader, it humbles them. Because they see power not as a right, but as a burden, one they must carry well. And if they ever forget, they return to the page, to the journal, to the silence, to check themselves before the world does. Power is a test, and the Stoic passes it by not letting it change who they are, but using it to serve what they believe. They don't just hold power, they hold themselves.